It is a pleasure indeed to see all of you here today. Thanks to the team from Informa for putting together such a magnificent event. And we are, of course, honored to have Minister Yannis Plakiotatis with us today. Thank you, sir, for your comments. Very heartfelt and appreciated for those of us that are in the industry. And we appreciate this magnificent nation that has such a rich history of leadership in the shipping sector. Our topic today is demystifying digitalization. Like the mythical icon of old that appeared on nautical charts, we are here today to slay that dragon. For far too long, far too many have been far too resistant to adopt new technologies, partly because they have had far too many questions about it, and understandably so, since it is such a rapidly evolving field with oftentimes high cost and elusive ROIs. Our goal over the next hour will be to address some of those concerns and hopefully be able to give some peace and clarity with moving forward on investing into the future. And we are, of course, pleased today to have such an illustrious panel of experts that have already been introduced to you. You're going to get to know them much better during this session today. And so, with that said, we're going to dive in just a moment. But before we do, in the spirit of embracing technology, I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and get out your cell phone. Some of you are on it already. Good job. You're ahead of everybody else. Get out your cell phone, and first of all, make sure it's in silent mode. And then please ensure you have downloaded this Slido app. And once you've got the app downloaded, as I'm doing now, you can input the code. This is going to allow you to participate with us. And as you can see, throughout today's panel, there's going to be surveys like the one on the screen. And we want you to participate with us, and simultaneously, you will be able to ask questions via the app, anonymously, I might add. So there's no dumb questions. And during the course of the panel, we will do our best to take some of those questions. And so, with that being said, let's begin with some quick opening remarks from our panelists on their initial thoughts on this subject. We appreciate them for traveling quite literally from around the world to be with us today. And how about we start with Carolyn, and then we'll let you gentlemen go next.
Okay, sure. Good morning, Minister, and good morning, everyone. And I do want to thank Informa for having me on this panel. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Caroline Young. I am from Singapore. On my day-to-day, I run a business, an SME company that owns about 35 tankers within the port as well as regionally. I am also the president of Singapore Shipping Association, a national shipping association that has about 450 members. And our spectrum of members range from the MNCs and to the SMEs. Thank you.
Ben?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Darren, for the introduction. And Minister, thank you for your wise words as well. The first thing for me to say is how brilliant it is to be back at what is an amazing trade party. I thought it was a trade show, but it turns out to be a fabulous celebration of all things maritime and all things Greece. And it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. And thanks, too, for having me on the panel. I think the second thing for me to say is that I'm looking forward to being demystified. I've only come into this world of maritime and digitalization relatively recently. I run the maritime piece of a company called Inmarsat. We provide the secure, mobile, global, resilient, assured communications and connectivity solutions that actually enable people like Caroline to exploit the value to be increasingly derived from the inexorable march towards a greater and more digital future. And I'm really looking forward, actually, to learning from the illustrious panel that we have before me. I would say one thing, Darren, by way of sort of picking up on some of the things that both the Minister said and you said. I've come from the world of defence and national security, where these huge questions around how do you extract benefit, value, a slightly more black and white value in some contexts in the battlefield, from exploiting big data, from autonomy, from real-time data transfer and decision support to support operations, a different type of operation, but operations nevertheless. And I've been grappling with that for some time, so I absolutely recognise this piece around potentiality versus confidence and business case versus solidity. And it's interesting to me to reflect on some of the lessons from that world as I come into this. My final closing comment would be, I think the Minister has it dead right. The relationship between the morning session and the afternoon session for me is palpable. The demand for our network and the capacity being driven by our customers through our network is going up exponentially over time, and that's being driven by people waking up to the economic and decarbonisation benefits that can be derived from embracing the sorts of technologies we're going to spend the morning talking about, and critically recognising that unless they've got the right squep, the right people with the right skills who stay in the industry, they don't have a business. And the demand for crew welfare, for crew connectivity is really driving alongside that business demand. So I'm going to be looking forward to hearing what the illustrious panel has to say, and I'm going to be taking quite a few notes as I go because I'm fairly new to this world. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ben. Jesse?
Thank you. I would echo all of these comments of thanks and privilege. I'm with a company called ioCurrents out of the United States, and we're a tech company. So my background is also not in maritime directly, although many of our staff have been Kings Point grads and have sailed all the seas. And our perspective, I think, more macro on this space of maritime is that there's a huge potential right now for this industry to leapfrog a technology generation. So 10, 15 years ago in the tech industry, big data was the sexiest thing you could talk about. Everyone wanted big data until they got it. And they used to be able to run their business on thumbnail snapshots of what was happening live and in the field. They knew that these thumbnail snapshots were 70% accurate, riddled with human error, and that they were probably 6 to 8 weeks old and dated, but it was good enough. But if we had all the data, we could make better decisions. And then they got all the data, and everyone said, well, what do we do with all this data? So the interpretation. So today you're going to hear, and for the next couple of years, you'll be hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of these things. The reality is that's just math. And all that is making sense of the big data that the world spent trillions of dollars and decades collecting. So today, and outside of maritime, all you hear about is artificial intelligence in the IoT space or wherever. That's really just to get you back to the thumbnail snapshots that you run your business on. Except now those thumbnail snapshots are hyper accurate and they're live. So that's, I think that as everyone is either in your digital journey, wherever you are, whether you're exploring it or deeply committed or all the way there, pay attention to the outputs. That's specifically what we're looking for, is what are you getting out of it? So just going digital is a big fluffy phrase, I think, that we're all here to say, well, what does that mean? And there's a lot of answers to that, but I think that you need to know what you're looking to solve first. And from there, you can pick vendors and partners that can help you along that journey.
Very good. Thank you. Stephen?
Thanks, Darren. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming here today. Thanks to the Minister for his speech. Actually, it's really good that you talked about the Seafarer as well, so there's so much a key element of this. I'm Stephen Mcfarlane. I'm the Group Chief Information Officer at V.Group, and I'm probably at the output end of this. I've got to deliver technology to our ships, our customers, our staff on board the vessels, and our staff in the office. So pretty much at the sharp end of how we use technology to deliver really good insights to our people, and it doesn't become a burden. And that's very much part of my philosophy, that it's whatever we do is got to be fit for purpose. It's got to have a value at all levels to the organization, and that sometimes that snapshot concept didn't always add value at all levels. So I'm really my sort of philosophy is, everyone's going to benefit from the use of digital technology. And digitalization is an interesting concept because actually that's more about how you use the processes you've digitalized. So it's really interesting. It's very much my focus, and maybe today I'll also just cover off a little bit on AI, because we are doing quite a bit on AI, but doing it in a very practical sense to support decision making. So maybe get that opportunity to talk about that today. Thanks, Darren.
Sean?
Good morning, and thank you, Minister. I think many of your words resonated very well with some of the activities we're doing. My name is Sean Fernback. I run a business unit for Wartsila called Voyage. We kind of think of ourselves as the tech arm of the business. There are 4 businesses within the Wartsila group. We are very focused and committed to decarbonisation. It's going to be a long journey and a hard journey for the industry. I think I've only been in maritime a few years, so a little longer than Ben, but I have learned one thing: it's not to call them boats. So I've survived quite well so far. So I think that the industry is faced with some significant challenges. I mean, above and beyond the challenges that you mentioned around the pandemic and, of course, the current geopolitical situation, the war in Ukraine. It's going through one of possibly the biggest paradigm shifts, in 100 years. The last one, possibly the introduction of the diesel engine. And if you look at industrialization over the last, say, 30 years, when it comes to technology, maritime is very, very much behind many other industries. And to us, of course, that is an opportunity, and to you, of course, it's a challenge. And at Voyage, we're looking to listen to our customers and address some of those problems that we're looking to solve. And we see it as an ecosystem that's forming both on the vessel and on the shore. We talk a lot about vessels and data and analysis, which many of us are all involved in, but there's also the shoreside component, and we're heavily investing and focusing also within the ports, looking at decongestion and optimization of port traffic and of course what happens within the port in terms of operations. So it's a complex ecosystem which is starting to unravel, and it will take us all through a combination of companies, years to provide the right solutions to help on this journey of digitalization. I think the other thing is that, which is kind of alluding to what you said, technology is a means to an end. Digitalization is a means to an end, and we're not going to decarbonize without the use of technology. And I think one of the key things that I see coming into maritime as our role as if you want, suppliers, there's a number of things. Firstly, I see we need to have a greater sense of collaboration. And we are really, by comparison, a small industry. And whichever number you choose, somewhere between 60 and 70, 80,000, shall we say, solar space vessels bobbing about in the ocean, that's a small industry, And I think that if we all go off and do our own thing, I think some of us are going to fail. And we don't want that to happen, because I think we're working against the clock. So I think that there's a greater need to collaborate between companies. That would be my first point. My second point is it's our role also to educate you. And we talk about AI and what have you, and they're all very important and relevant, and you'll hear much more about that as these things evolve over the coming years. And data, and we need to educate you around data. And how do we set you up so that we can share more data and use that data to enrich decision making and what have you. And that's something we need to take you on as a journey. That's an education. Everyone thinks they get a bit of data, they're going to make a lot of money. And I have a little bit of a background in automotive, and I can tell you they learn the hard way. And they're not making a lot of money out of data, but they're improving their products and services through data. And that's what we want to do as suppliers of products and services collectively. We want to improve the quality of our products and services that we deliver. And I think the other thing that is going to be a shift in mindset, really, is how these things get paid for. So somebody has to mention money, so I'm going to mention it. You're moving from less of a CapEx model, if you want, to an OpEx model. Software isn't something you do once. It's something you invest in continuously. And I'll use cybersecurity as an example. Cyber is going to get harder and is going to need continuous investment and improvement to make sure that our connectivity and the services that we provide on vessel and shore are secure, and that we don't have any nasty incidents either at sea or on port. So we have to invest in software, and our companies that invest in software, need to somehow make a return on that. So we will start to talk about new pricing models, moving away from the traditional CapEx model. You buy a radar, you put it on your vessel, it runs for 10 years, and that's fantastic. It's a different thing with software, and our FOSS platform is an example of this, where it's a rolling 3-year contract, and we'll see more of that. But I think, coming back to the point of education, and I'll stop here, it's making you understand the value of continuous investment in software and what value that will then ultimately deliver to you.
Thank you, Sean. Mike?
Hello. I'm the CEO of METIS Cyberspace Technology, and since our company has been established by 7 co-founders, all engineers and scientists with a considerable background and experience and know-how on how state-of-the-art technologies are being applied in this old-school industry. And since we are established and based in Athens, Greece, so it's my turn to welcome you all to this. It's not a show, it's not an exhibition, it's a party, as mentioned before. So welcome to this huge party in Athens and enjoy your time. Having said that, I need to admit that currently we already established subsidiaries in Singapore. We have offices in Hamburg and Oslo. We have customers in London, in Middle East area, in Dubai. So this means that this huge digital wave, this huge ocean swell, is not simply coming, it's already here, and there is no any way to ignore it or to somehow avoid it. We definitely need to be able to ride it. And this is exactly what we are doing, and this is exactly what we need to somehow help this sector, this industry, to become literate, to become data literate, to become digital literate. This is extremely important. Technology doesn't replace humans, it augments humans. And there is a huge room for improvement on that. And since shipping has a lot of challenges, and recently an ever-increasing regulatory compliance obligations, and of course, there is demand for an environmental footprint optimization, which is actually the other side of the same problem, which is the time charter equivalent revenue optimization. Digitalization is an essential part of the solution of such a multi-parametric, complicated problem. So, data gathering from vessels, enriching them with third-party data. Data is essential. Data is the king. We are living in a data-driven economy. So we need to commit, and we need to understand that digitalization needs the raw material, which is extremely essential, which is called data, real, accurate, reliable, real-time data. And then the idea is to bring some value here. And of course, this is the biggest challenge, and this is something that hopefully and obviously is appreciated by shipping companies worldwide that trust the trailblazing, groundbreaking, value-adding services that they differentiate them and helps them and paving the way through the next and new era in worldwide global maritime industry. I think that's about it right now, and we'll go deeper in details later.
Thank you, Mike. Mark? Yes, and first of all, thank you, Seatrade, thank you, Minister, for setting the scene here. It's always the perils of being on the end of a panel that a lot of topics are discussed, but just to, I guess where I can add value perhaps is, this is actually my 12th Posidonia. The first Posidonia, I was I have to say, a young journalist, and I started interviewing companies, the new dot-coms that were coming in the late 1990s, and they were going to set to change the world and revolutionize, and everything was hunky-dory. Many of them failed, right? And then for my own digital journey, I then moved from journalist to working in a startup, scale-up, seeing what startups and scale-ups, and you know, Jesse, obviously you'll appreciate this, Mike as well, you know, the trials and tribulations of a startup into scale-up. So we went to there, and then working, went into the corporate world, worked with Inmarsat, and now at Lloyd's Register. And some things have changed, and other things haven't changed at all, right, over those 20 plus years. I think I'd like to just talk about, and of course some of these points have already been put together, but around digital transformation rather than digitalization, and digital transformation specifically for shipping companies, because obviously I've worked very closely with them throughout those last 20 years, and I've seen some patterns and seen some kind of what I would call, and also Deloitte, I don't know for those digital purists in the audience, Deloitte has done these pivots that is fundamental to digital transformation and digital maturity in companies. And I think you can really apply that to the shipping industry. So the first one, and no surprise, connected, flexible, secure infrastructure. So obviously coming in, to what Inmarsat are doing and other satellite, other satellite operators out there as well, that is important. And we have now, we've reached a stage where that is not an issue anymore. The satellite operators, the capacity's there, everything's available. So then you move on, secure, and it's been mentioned, Sean mentioned it, very, very important, and will continue to be going forward as well. So that kind of connected, secure, flexible, you have to have that in place to really kind of use that as the base platform, the enabler, as Ben said. Then it's about, and again, it's been picked up, automated, intelligent workflows. Changing processes, and that's really, really important, and certainly an early lesson, and was some of the reason why those dot-coms failed, 20 years ago. That's the reason. They couldn't automate, and they couldn't move it into intelligent workflows and bring people on that journey as well. And then it's data quality. It's important that, yes, you may be getting tons of data from a vessel, but what are you doing with that? It's collection. It's analysis, but more importantly, it's decisions based on that analysis. That's the key. And I think, again, Sean alluded to that. Fourth point, and arguably the most important point, and one thing that I've seen, throughout my digital journey, is digital talent. You have to have people understanding, in a shipping company, you need people understand. I'll give a very quick example. 3 years ago, I won't name the company's name, at Inmarsat, we were talking with a Southeast Asia operator, walked through the door, 2 people in the room, didn't want to know about digital transformation, didn't have a digital transformation strategy, door shut. 6 months ago, as Lloyd's Register, walked through that door, 3 people in the room, door wide open, wanted to talk about everything that they were doing in terms of digital transformation. How could we help them? How could we improve performance? And the reason why? Because the third person in the room had come from a big container ship operator, had worked outside the industry, and was coming in and revolutionized. And that's really important. But it's also equally important on the ship. And I know, obviously, we've got a whole session on crew, but it's equally important. And then the fifth one, and it's been touched on, so I'll just kind of bring it to a close, but it's around collaboration. We've got an accelerator. We go in, we ask companies their challenges, particularly when it comes to safety and risk, and they're not unique to that company. Other companies have it, and other companies join. And working with startups, working with other corporates, you actually come together and you solve those challenges together, and that's vitally important. Good.
Fantastic. And I just want to say thanks again to our panelists for being here. Appreciate all of their introductions, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention a special thanks to both ioCurrents and Wartsila for sponsoring this session. So thank them for that investment. So I noticed a while ago the responses for the first poll indicated that about half of our audience is considerably invested into their digital journey thus far. And I think maybe it would be good for us to just start with, what is digitalization? What is digitalization not? And Jesse, you want to kind of lead us into that?
Sure. I don't know that anyone on this panel is here to tell you what digitalization is not. I think that we can hone our conversation around what we want to focus on today. So an example, I spoke with a large ship management CIO recently and asked about their digitalization journey and what they were doing, and they were 3 years in and they were heavily invested, and okay, what are you doing? And it was all an ERP system to manage crews and supplies and take 13 silos and put them under one umbrella, and that is digitalization. That's not what ioCurrents does. I don't think that's the specific focus of this panel today. So it's a broad subject. I think that what we're talking about today is really focused on the vessels and the operations. So what can we do with the shortage of staffing and the overtasked crew? What can we do to automate manual tasks? What can we do to increase accuracy and timeliness for the crew so that they can do what they've been trained best to do and not paperwork or digital stuff? I think it's about, our company focuses specifically on vessel health and predicting failures and how can we help with maintenance cycles, and that's reliant on the ingredients, as Mike alluded to, and Ben's focus, working with partners who can provide good quality data. So getting that ingredient, and then again, it's talking about what do you want to do with that data? What do you want to do with those ingredients? So key performance indicators are a huge, easy first step. If you aren't terribly far in your journey, sensors are a part of the equation. That's how you get the data. It's connecting that to the cloud so you have access to the data. But then it's, again, what's the analysis? What's the interpretation? So are you focused on voyages? Are you focused on the logistics that Wartsila will help you with on the bridge equipment and et cetera? Are you focused on maintenance cycles, predicting failures? Are you focused on emissions? Obviously, CII scores are coming up. So when you're working with partners like us, like Mike, I think that talking very specifically about the outputs that are important for you over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and as you go through that, how do we help you walk along the path rather than diving in and changing your entire workflow and retraining everyone all at once? What can we do to walk along the journey together? I think that making sure that whomever you are working with is working with class societies like Lloyd's or DNV like we are, and making sure that CII scores are accurate and you have better access to those things so that you can be making the changes needed on an ongoing basis rather than being shocked with results later. So I think that's predominantly where this panel will focus. I don't know if anyone totally disagrees with me, but that's what I think that digitalization today should mean.
Well, no, it's very good because, I guess I'm one of the older people on this audience, or pardon me, this panel, at least in terms of maritime industry. When I got in the industry, we had telex, typewriter, and radio officers, and we have none of those things today. They're all gone the way of the dodo bird, and so there was then no tech companies, as it were. The only tech companies you could find were the guys who would get on board and work on the satellites. Now we've got a lot of providers, some of which are on this stage. And the question really is, the maritime tech sector, is it getting too crowded, or is there still plenty of room for more solution providers? And if so, what kind of providers are needed that can really propel the industry with some actionable insights forward? Sean, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Thank you. If I may start, digitalisation, and that's a word that can be challenging to some at 3 o'clock in the morning, but as I said earlier, it's a means to an end. And, I have quite a strong consumer background, which I actually think is an advantage coming into maritime, because in consumer, we very much focus on the problems that we're trying to solve for the customer and not trying to produce a bit of tech that hopefully somebody wants to pay for. And when you look at maritime, there's a set, we've talked about this, I've talked about this paradigm shift. There are many problems that are ahead, and the minister mentioned crew, or the shortages of crew, and I thought 90,000 was an outstanding, an alarming figure. So we're looking at, for example, how we can reduce the number of crew by automating some of the operations. So I think there are technologies there to solve some of these forthcoming problems. And I think the thing that needs to move, and it's probably one of our greater challenges, and I think you touched on it, Mark, is on the regulatory side. It needs to keep a pace with us. And technology moves very quickly. We've seen that from, as I said earlier, we look at how technology has changed the world in 20 years in many, many different industries. And it's going to happen in maritime. I mean, when I started 2 years ago, nobody really talked about digitalization, or they didn't really talk about decarbonisation, and now a day doesn't go by. And it's having, there's an exponential effect happening. So we're all going to move quickly. We're listening to customers, and we're figuring out how to solve some of these complex problems. But we need the support of the industry to put the pressure on the regulatory authorities to help, come with us on this journey. So I think that's a really important thing, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I don't know how we go around and how we collaborate again as a body to say, look, you need to move faster, you need to help us. Otherwise, I do believe there will be incumbents that will just say, well, we're going to do it anyway, we'll pay the fine. And there could be, and I believe in some sectors there will be some disruption. So incumbents that will come in that are having to move a lot of goods on a daily basis between various places on the globe, and they will decide to do it a different way, and they have the deep pockets to do so. And I think we know who we're talking about. So we need to be aware of that as an industry. You don't want somebody else eating your lunch. But we also need to put the pressure on the regulatory authorities to really move much faster.
Yeah, no, I would agree. One question that comes to mind. Stephen, go ahead.
I think one of the, what you asked is there still space for people to come up with solutions? Is there still the opportunity in the market to bring these in? And I think, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to discourage that. So, if we do discourage it, and that's a message we give, is we're not open to startups, we're not open to people trying new ideas, we're actually going to go back as an industry. So we've got to encourage it. We may have to put a bit more structure around it, and there's been lots of good startups over the years. Some have been absorbed into the bigger businesses, and some of the good bits of these have disappeared, and they've turned up in other areas and become more difficult to get to. But you've got to encourage it, and I think as a ship operator, we encourage it. We see the future. The future is open in terms of integrating with different solutions, and there will be a lot of very good startups in the industry who really do certain things incredibly well. And when they do them really well, you'll integrate with them, and they'll become part of your ecosystem. And the only way to get there is to encourage them through accelerator programs or whatever's out there to do that. But let's not discourage it, because that's going to set us back.
I would be interested to hear from Carolyn because of your involvement with the Singapore Shipowners Association. And, obviously Singapore is such a critical area geographically to the global maritime community. Do you have any thoughts on this, and maybe specifically how we can look at digitalization in a way that it can reduce downtime for ship owners?
Okay, I share his views on that we must encourage startups. And we do that in Singapore. There is really a push by the government as well as the industry. The question is, we must always encourage startups But the solutions that they come up with, they have to work very closely with the industry. The problem statements must come from the industry. I think that is important. And at some point in time, there will have to be some rationalization of the different startups. And some will fall by the wayside and some will get bigger. And hopefully, now we're just seeing the cups of change. So hopefully we have that involvement. I think many startups are coming in and coming up with many good ideas, and because maritime is very much a laggard in terms of digitalization, and therefore many problem statements. And because of that, you should see all the ideas sprouting out and all the solutions coming out. And hopefully in some years we do see a rationalization and also a more coherent system of solutions. That is my hope. And I think we will see that. And we talk about reduction of downtime. So when a company does a digital transformation journey, the technology is an enabler. The technology has to help to streamline the operations and the processes. It has to be human-centered applications to uplift the performance of the crew as well as the people working in the office. And once you are able to be successful in that, I think you have so many efficiencies that are being addressed. Route optimization, which then gives you the fuel consumption, the saving of the fuel consumption, which also brings down the carbon footprint. And you will have lesser number of crew, but a uplifted caliber of crew. And you will have a ship arrival to berth, and with that, and the seamless delivery of marine services. And with that, you have the fuel consumption because you can time the delivery, the ship arrival to berth, to load, to discharge. So with all these efficiencies, hopefully as a company, you can do more with less and you make more money.
That's good.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I'm going to come to you in just a second. Ben, I know you got a follow-up, but before you do, I want to encourage the audience to start sending us some Slido questions. We'll get those, and maybe if we want to go ahead and put that next poll up for everyone to kind of engage. Ben, did you want to follow up on that?
Well, I'm starting to be demystified, which is great. But I'm struck by the parallels between my past world and the conversation that's going on here, and I'm also struck by the relationship between what is digitalization and the conversation that we've just had. And what I mean by that, for me, as well as what you said, which I think is on point, it's about change. Change in radical change in approach, but also a way of navigating more smoothly the changes that are coming because of the increased agility that the digitalization will drive. But it's also about value, and I think that's the linkage to the point we were having just now. It seems to me we're kind of in the battle of ideas phase still. Yep. And an idea, we want to, I think as Stephen said, we want to encourage the ideas because out of that will come value. My past experience tells me, though, that innovation is not just an idea. We've got on idealization, but we want value. Innovation is about connecting ideas and deriving value. And I think we've got to get more efficient about the sentencing and the getting from the battle of ideas to the collaboration around innovation that's actually going to drive material change and value. And that's the piece that I think from my personal world has been really hard. And I just sense we need to find a new ecosystem, a new collaboration model that allows people with real use cases from which they can derive value by applying transformationally changed ways of doing things, and get to that suite of things we actually want to go out and prosecute, because that will drive adoption, that will drive value, that will drive new extensions of that. And that's the piece that for me I think is hard. And in an industry that I think the best one in the world perhaps isn't as practiced at speedy adoption of new ways of working as fast-moving consumer goods, for example, that's always going to be a challenge. I think we have a responsibility, as well as the regulator, to figure out what that black box that sentences idea, use case, value creation, and therefore scalable innovation. And I think that will come to your point, Mark, about what's the collaboration and ecosystem development mechanism that we as an industry put in place. Sorry,
That's great. And I want to go ahead and attack one of these dragons that needs to be demystified, talking about a problem that's arising out of industry with the regulatory side. Mike, talk to us for a minute about CII and how you think that digitalization can help with reporting, monitoring, and ultimately improving, in that particular area.
Right. Thank you, Darren. This is a very insightful question, and this is a very challenging subject. Hopefully, at last, we have consistency as far as all those indices that we have been introduced recently. And CII is in the right direction. So in order to be able to optimize it, you need to, in order to improve anything, you need first to measure and properly analyze it. Otherwise, it's not possible, right? So CII is needing to be measured and calculated daily because this is a year-to-date index. So you need to be able to follow it every single day. And I can assure you there is a huge area for improvement only with operational fine-tunings, without any modification yet. This is because of a hard fact that we need realistically to admit. No two vessels are exactly alike, even if they are identical sister vessels, for a number of different reasons, because they do have different hull and propeller fouling, because they do have different efficiency of their main engine, they have different damages, different repairs, different maintenance, and maybe equally important, they burn different type, but quality of fuel as well, and of course, they being sailed by different crews with different experience, different training, or different reactions in different weather conditions or other situations. So it's like personalities. Every single vessel develops its own behavior. So if you are able, and this is digitalization, because digitalization is not to keep operating like this industry has been doing in the 18th century. For example, noon reports. Noon reports is not digitalization. Even if some companies use this hype, like I made a software that can store and manage noon reports. This is not digitalization. I'm sorry, guys. This is like a devaluation and maybe a disappointment of the industry because this brings no value. With one indication, manually and fragmentary reporting of every single parameter, this cannot lead to any serious, considerable performance analysis. So, yes, the CII is, there is another myth that to become greener, it costs more money. This is wrong. To become greener doesn't necessarily cost more money. On the contrary, it saves money. Right. To switch off the light in an empty room in your house doesn't cost money. It saves money. So to find the optimum speed or RPM of your specific vessel, as it is now, not 10 years ago when it was built in a shipyard, this doesn't cost money, but it is the value that we bring with the digitalization. That's why digital technologies are part of the solution of such a problem. And for sure, the improvement that we see, and we can prove it, are huge. And then comes to the modifications that maybe, most probably in many of the vessels, are needed, and this comes also as an outcome of a proper study based on data. We need to be able to take data-driven decisions. Now, as far as the downtime that you mentioned before, it is also part of the value-adding services that digital solutions provide. Because if you have a proper real-time monitoring of every single vessel, you can prevent damages in time. So this is how digital solutions bring real quantitative value, and CII increases the profit if you properly are able to optimize it. The fuel savings are huge, are tremendous, and this is good for the environment as well.
Yeah, and that's good. So, Stephen, I'm going to come to you in just a minute because as an operator or a manager of a lot of ships, I want your thoughts here. But Mark, first, from a regulatory side, from a class society, do you think that it's even going to be possible to comply with these new regulations without digital solutions?
Short answer, no. But I think, just building on what Mike says, I think, the real key is, you've got to have those fleet optimization, solutions. It's on a voyage by voyage basis, so you have to have that data. And it's going to. We're in a transition, like fuels. We're in a transition period of. It will start with noon reports into automated reports into real-time, high-frequency data. Bringing that in, and again back to that kind of analysis and then outcomes based on that. So you are going to have fleet optimization, but at the same time, and Mike touched on it there. There's also what are you the measures? What are you going to be putting on board? Understanding, is it air lubrication systems? But more importantly, what's the payback on that? And of course, to measure that, that's again where you need the digital solutions. You need to be monitoring them all the time and coming back. I'm not going to name names, but there's some air lubrication systems that can save you 8% in fuel savings. There's others that can do 2 or 3%. But of course, the investment is different. So you have to make those decisions. You can only make those decisions based on data and analysis and working with advisors, trusted advisors like ourselves and other class societies. I'll keep by working with them. Because we're seeing that. We're seeing, our surveyors are all on board, and we're kind of understanding that. We've got that knowledge, and, we can then work in collaboration, work with fleet optimization systems, and really kind of get an end-to-end of, what actually works, and it is a transition, I don't want to go into the fuel debate, but there's still, we're still kind of taking those baby steps on that energy transition pathway. And so, but you've got, everything needs to be tied up. You can't do one thing. You can't do the measure and optimization and not have that kind of full visibility of, what energy-saving devices do, energy-saving technologies, and what is the kind of the outcome and the impact on your performance, on your earnings, and on your kind of environmental rating as well.
Right. Yeah, I want to be conscious of our time, so we're going to start going speed round on some of these questions. But Stephen, I want you to speak to that, but also, if all the ship owners around enthusiastically embraced digitalization tomorrow, what would that look like in terms of value creation? So,
that's a big question, Darren.
Yeah. Sorry.
So in terms of the sort of up and coming CII, EXXI, these elements, technology, but both digital technology, but also engineering technology is very much part of this. And we've built, for example, an emissions trading scheme platform within our business so that we can actually have conversations with our customers about the impact of that. And then we're looking at all the different solutions, and we're looking at the impact of the vessels. So, from a ship operator's point of view, build a task force is what we've done. We started it last year, and they're really, really focused on that. And you can't ignore it. And it's not just digital in that sense. It's talking to the manufacturers of the engines and those elements, and bringing all that together into a cohesive group, which is what we've done. I think the journey the business shipping is on, and Caroline made the point, is we will be on a journey, right? At some point in time, we will stop sending ships around the world in ballast to pick up voyages. We will stop anchoring ships off ports for 14, 28 days, because we'll all be in a common digital ecosystem. And we will actually know when we're picking up a cargo, when we're picking up the vessel which makes the most economic sense, and we're delivering it to the right place at the right time. We're not there now. Actually, at the moment, it's worse. Some of the delays in ports is worse than it's ever been. But that's the journey this industry will go on, because if we don't go on that journey, we'll never meet the requirements around decarbonisation. And that's sort of Industry 4.0 looking ahead. We're on that journey, and ship owners and ship operators are starting that now. If you're not starting to think about that in terms of your digital ecosystem, you probably won't be left behind, right? But you will be lagging, and you won't be part of the conversation. So if you start doing it now, you're going to be part of the conversation and thinking about how do you digitalize it. But of course, the key one here is standards, okay? Regulation and standards, but standards is a critical element. People have to be open to being open, right? Vendors need to understand that proprietary data isn't actually as proprietary as they think it is, and we need to talk. Now, whether that's through blockchain or just industry standards, but always the challenge in maritime, and probably in a lot of industries, is who owns the standard, who places the standard, does it have a cost? And the minute it has a cost, it ends up going back to being a proprietary standard. I think we've got to be more mature this time, and we've got to build a standard that we're going to live with and we're going to use for a number of years, and we're going to add different elements into those standards about sharing information, because if we don't, I think that we're not going to achieve what we want to achieve in this journey.
That's good, yeah. So I want to take one of the audience questions. Jesse, we'll let you take a stab at this one, and that is, how do the shipping companies build a baseline case for new tech, a business case for new tech when baseline data is so sparse?
It's a great question. Again, I think it goes to what your goals are. The baseline data is not actually that hard to get a hold of. Whether you're working with someone like Mike, someone like us, Ben, it doesn't take long to understand, again, this is speaking just on the vessel perspective, to understand what that vessel is doing now. And to build that benchmark and that baseline is the foundation, as Mike said, to be able to, you can't manage what you can't measure. So if you can start with a baseline measurement, then you can look at some core areas of your business that you can start enhancing. Again, that can be based on reducing fuel costs. So emissions are tied directly to your fuel consumption. That's an easy one. It can be to optimize your maintenance scheduling so that you're not over-maintaining or reducing unforeseen downtime. Obviously, day rates are highly important. So making sure that your uptime is optimized is part of our core mission statement. And then it's tracking these basic indicators and making sure that you have good contracts with your clients as an operator around fuel and day rates and being able to optimize that. And again, you have to be able to track that. So I think that getting a data collection mechanism on board, the data's there. I mean, our philosophy, and I think everyone here would understand that we see every vessel as a floating data center. These are incredibly advanced assets. We just haven't done a lot with that data yet. So again, getting access to it is step one. Building a baseline is very, very simple. Understanding what your vessel looks like today. And to Mike's point, it's not what it looked like coming out of the yard 10 years ago. It's what's its performance indicators today. What does that vessel behave like today? And then to continually track, where are your technical performance degradations? That's an area to focus on for optimization for maintenance. Where are your crews, and being able to correlate, again, from a fleet-wide level to look at your outliers and manage by exception. Which vessels or which operators or which crews are the best performers consistently across a longer period of time, which ones are not. Which vessels or which subsystems on board are more problematic than others. This goes into new builds and new manufacturers and what's the total cost of ownership these are all bite-sized pieces. They sound huge, but they're not. They're very simple, and it all comes from the same place, just creating a baseline perspective of what your vessel is, a little bit of data collection of the existing sensor network, the existing data that's already being pumped out on that vessel that you may or may not be doing much with. So a lot of people have invested in sensors, and that's a good step. But what do you do with it? And that's I think, where most of this panel comes in.
So when you look at this question, this poll we've got in front of us, I mean, the biggest challenge that companies are facing, it's evenly divided between the ROI isn't clear, but even if it was, we wouldn't have the talent to implement on it.
So Mike should tackle this, but my brief interruption, apologetically, I think the ROI, again, is going to be a sit-down. Like, give 5 minutes to Mike, give 5 minutes to me, give 5 minutes to someone up here, and let's talk about a couple of quick things. It's really quite impactful. From a lack of talent to implement, again, we shouldn't be talking about massive change management here. We shouldn't be talking about retraining everyone on staff. We're talking about the key performance indicators that you either already have but are not very good, they're riddled with errors or they're untimely, or it's data or viewpoints that you've always wished you had but you don't yet. We can provide those. And that's our job. We're the guys to implement it, not you. We're the guys that have to provide you with those results so that you can take action on them. Sorry, Mike.
Mike, take a minute and stab at this.
Sure, I need less. The ROI is extremely clear. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, I had a meeting with a good customer of ours that honored us with appointing one vessel of his whole fleet. So last year, the whole year, we assessed and we studied this specific vessel's performance. And we told them, look, guys, you are spoiling fuel. Tell to your captain, to your good experienced captain, that in ballast, you need to sail this vessel in this speed, in good weather conditions, in bad weather conditions, this speed, in laden accordingly. So last year, they had CII 3.8. This year, year to date, as we speak now, in early June, the CII of this specific vessel, without any modification, without any dry docking, it is 2.6. Do you know how much money this is? It's 942 metric tons of spoiled fuel oil during last year, which with 4-digit numbers per metric ton is over $1 million. Does it make any sense for ROI? Absolutely, because those technologies are ridiculous investments. It's nearly nothing. Yeah. And the ROI is tremendous. You don't need trained staff or talented whatever. The technology brings you the result. It brings you the actionable information. Yeah. That's why those systems, from monitoring systems, will change to control systems and paving the way to the autonomous system. But we do have a lot of work until then. Now, let's utilize the diamonds and the pearls that artificial intelligence and machine learning, actually this is the revolution that technology brings, gives you some real money in your pocket. This is the message.
That's good. Sean?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First, I do like the point here. And I'd like to link this back to decarbonisation, and let's not ignore, how we're destroying our planet, and let's play a part in trying to reduce that. So I would say, number one, the cost of not doing this is far greater. Right. Yeah, and I think the other point, and I think this is something that's come up a few times for me yesterday, talking to a raft of different customers, is I think, and it goes back to my opening remark about educating, is we need to do a much better job at articulating this. Sitting a customer down here in Posidonia and they're operating 35 vessels and saying, well, our vessel optimization system will save you money. It's going to go nowhere. And we need to really think about how, and again, coming from the consumer background, where you spend a lot of time figuring out the articulation of the value proposition, yeah? And kind of back to Ben's point, the conversation needs to be about how the value is created, because if you can demonstrate that clearly to the customer, the cost is irrelevant.
Yeah, that's good. So let's kind of pivot here carefully, briefly, because when we talk about talent, when we talk about new solutions, and I want to be careful because I know our next panel is going to talk some about the seafarers, but Stephen, I'd like, y'all manage several hundred ships, which is a lot of crew, and I want you to, if you can, just briefly touch on the digital impact to the seafarer of all these great ideas everybody innovates with. For the people who actually have to be on the business end of that, talk to us for a second about that.
Yeah, so I think as I said earlier when I started, I always think about the seafarer. I am an ex-seafarer, so I have an advantage that I'm always thinking of what it would look like to me if I ended up with this technology thrown at me. Unfortunately, a bit like Darren, it wasn't there when I was at sea, but we'll not go there. I think it's really key here that we just don't take loads of data off ships, okay? And my philosophy is always to put, and try and actually do the analysis on the ship, okay? Give it back to the ship staff. You've got some great people there. You've got lots of great people. They're well trained. They are actually digitally enabled. So don't take all that information and stream it all ashore and replicate what they could already be doing with that information with people ashore, second guessing what they can do. Get a blended environment where the data comes ashore, the data's with the ship staff at the same time, and digitally enable the ship staff to be in that decision-making loop. And that's what we've done. Now, so we refreshed our whole technology platform across all of our ships in sort of 2018-19. And one of a very simple application we put in that, right, was a master's dashboard, okay? So we gave the master and chief engineer a dashboard that showed them everything that was happening on the ship. So they can, the captain can now see the planned maintenance without going into the planned maintenance. He can see his spares. He can see what's happening on work and rest. He can see everything. And actually, when we ask them what's the thing they really like the best, they go, the dashboard. It's brilliant. And actually, that has two effects because one is he sees that, but the other one is they understand the value of the data. They don't believe they're reporting data for the sake of reporting it. They're getting immediate value. It's making their life easier. It's making their port state control and their inspections easier. It's actually they're using it to drive the management meetings. So I think it's really clear when you go on a journey around digitalizing these processes that you start thinking about it from the user experience. So first thing we thought about is how do we bring that to the captain and the guys on the ship so that they can actually see that immediate value. And everything I try to do is about making sure that the guys at the edge, right, who are actually at the coal face, right at the front, they're at the sharp edge, get as good a digital experience as we do ashore. And it's absolutely key. And I'll just quickly talk on, so we rolled this platform out. We've now gone a stage further, and I'll just very quickly cover it. We've built an AI platform. We've spent 18 months building an AI platform into our environment, and it has the same purpose. But the AI platform, which we call Sentinel within our platform, is designed to almost be a digital knowledge worker, okay? So actually to embrace the work that everybody's doing, whether they're ashore or on the vessel, and look across all that complex data. Complex data. We have so much data flying around this industry. The captain and the teams in the office have to think about maintenance. They've got to think about port arrival. They've got to think about safety. They've got to think about all of this. And in theory, they're only working for 8 or 10 hours a day. But all this data is flowing around. So what we did is we built our AI platform to actually work for them 24 hours a day. So that's where you can use advanced technology like AI as an accelerator within your business. And for me, it takes two things, right? It takes risk out your business, and it produces certainty. You have a more certain outcome and operating your vessels, and you remove risk because you've got your data working for you and supporting your knowledge workers in it who've got a really complex job.
Yeah, now that's really good from a ship operator's perspective. I think that's extremely useful. One of the questions I think we should address is why do owner managers discount time savings entirely from these ROI equations and only focus on the cost savings? Now that's a good question because, you know, sometimes it gets too lost in just the math and the numbers. You know, I don't know. Who wants to take a stab at that? We'll open it up. You got to be quick, though. We got 20 minutes left here, so whoever's going to answer has got to be quick.
I can be very quick.
Okay.
Because money makes the world go around, I think.
Okay. Are they missing a critical point by not looking at the time? Because there is a cost, a big cost to time, and that may be hard to measure, but you can't overlook it.
I can't answer it as well as the two to my left, but our clients do consider that. I mean, one brief example is we have a large client out of the Seattle market. They have vessels in Hawaii, and they had one vessel under warranty that had a major issue, had to have dry dock time, sea trials. It was all covered for the hardware, but OEM reps, and they considered that downtime, crew time, their time to fly people from Seattle and all over the country to get out there to resolve the issue, when then 6 months later, the sister vessel also had the exact same issue within a couple of minutes. Our philosophy is we tell you when and where to pay attention. So that's where we direct you from a maintenance and on-time perspective. Within 10 minutes, because we were highlighting exactly where and what was happening, he was able to discover there was air in the lines, and he was able to call the guys and say, flush the lines. And their calculations, it saved him $135,000 in 2 weeks. And that's total time with downtime and cost involved in all of that. But certainly I think that most of the clients we work with do consider that, especially when you're talking about plugging in a DCS or MRV reports directly to Lloyd's or DNV and not having to have the shoreside team take what was done in the engine room.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was just going to, we've got two people who might be able to address the premise of the question. And the premise of the question is that they don't. In my business, time is a massive, and downtime is a very important discriminator of value, and it's something that people care a lot about. So I'm scratching my head about whether I accept the premise of the question. And I just wanted to ask the two people on the stage whether they do.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you do that at your peril. Because all the customers you work with, all the oil majors and all your, especially on time charter, time savings is one of the key KPI that they look into. So I think you do that at your peril is really one of the key consideration.
I mean, I don't know who asked the question, but I wonder if the questions come from somebody who's trying to convince a ship owner on the ROI. Ship owner's probably not going to tell you how much time they spend doing something, but I think we definitely think about it. I do think this industry, you know, if I go back to what I said earlier about you're becoming more certain as operators, taking out the uncertainty, people accept uncertainty. They accept that at some point that ship's going to stop. They accept that ship's going to lay over. And actually, you know, generally what I find is when I drill into the data behind that, this is why I started my platform, actually. I could predict that. And it's that shift we've got to get to people, is if you could predict that, there's your ROI, because that's your time saving.
It's an opportunity cost.
Yep.
That's good. So, you know, one of the questions that I see here that I think is kind of interesting is if there's so much data that's out there, what data is the most important? And I know that that's kind of it's going to be hard to boil that down in a couple minutes, but for those that are out there trying to think ahead about, okay, if I was to digitalize and I was to try and get more, better, cleaner data, which data should I prioritize in order to get the best ROI quickest? Now, Mark, I'm going to turn to you. You know, this is probably not something you don't have anything to sell in this context, but from a class society perspective, this has got to be a question that comes around often. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think, you know, it depends on the challenge, really, what you're trying to address. I think, you know, data can be important if it's analyzed and you can, you know, make decisions based on that data. And that can be anything from, you know, safety data, navigational, you know, sensor data, you know, and that sensor data can come from everything, including wearable technology from the crew as well. You know, I mean, we work across, you know, multiple data sets. I'll give you examples. You know, we provide, we work with Intermanager to look at their lifeboat incident data and to kind of look at what, you know, what's the cause, because here the human factor was, you know, kind of being put up as the cause for lifeboat incidents. You know, we used AI, machine learning, root cause analysis, and it was actually, you know, a lot of it was equipment, you know, equipment issues, and that kind of disproved that hypothesis. And that's just one example. You know, we work voice analysis with shipowners operators, actually through our safety tech accelerator, where, you know, we're looking at kind of stress levels in crew, and then and trying to monitor that early. And, you know, I think as long, you know, does that data, you know, by having that, collating it, analyzing it, and then looking at the impact and the outcomes of that analysis, you know, what is that solving a challenge? I think that is always the question. You know, I don't think that you can kind of sweepingly say, well, some data is more important than others. You know, we've spoken about CII, and, you know, emissions data is going to be critical. It's going to be, you know, a move into real-time frequency, and of course, you need that to meet your, you know, environmental ratings. You need to keep your rating below, and that's going to be the difference from trading or not trading in a few years' time, right?
So, you know, we hear a lot about just-in-time arrival, and this panel is like a ship. We're fixing to have a just-in-time docking. We've got about 15 minutes left, and what I want to do is give each of you just kind of 2 minutes for parting thoughts. There's a lot of great questions here. There's no way we could ever get to all of them. But so I want to give everybody 2 minutes, parting thoughts. Mike, we'll start with you, and then we'll make our way back around to end with Mark. Mike?
Right. Thank you. Having currently in our database more than 120 billions of measurements from our vessels' customers, I can assure you that you can't throw away, you can't give away any actual, accurate, reliable, clean, and synchronized data. The data is the king in our age, and the data needs to be utilized properly through the utilization of the state-of-the-art technologies. Regarding the just-in-time docking or all these things, this is also data that need to be taken into account, is the scheduling data. So it's a terribly complicated, multi-parametric problem. The human brain cannot solve it. I'm sorry. We need big data, and then we approach proper, reliable solutions to this problem. And all accurate data, the fragmentary and the garbage data, you can ignore them. They are useless. But the actual data, they are totally useful, and we need to keep them and do some benchmarking, other types of conclusions as well.
That's good. That's good. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, we could take a learning from the airline industry here, which is way up on that curve in terms of maturity. And we have proven, you know, the just-in-time arrival model. We did it with a vessel leaving Tangier Med last year, actually. So these problems are solved today, but they need a change in processes and behavior, which technology won't address, by the way. Yeah, which is, I might come back to my high horse of regulatory assistance here, you know. So, because there is, in some cases, there is as I learned, that there is an advantage for some vessels being out on anchor. for a period of time, drummage, whatever it's called. So this needs fundamental changes in regulatory and behavior, but there is absolutely no reason, and it's not complex, to predict and set the perfect time of arrival at berth of any vessel from any point of origin.
Yeah, that's good. And keep in mind, for y'all's closing comments, y'all don't feel obligated to talk about JIT. I told somebody the other day who was trying to sell JIT, I said, I've been an agent for 26 years. We made JIT legit. That's what agents have done for all this time. Stephen, parting thoughts?
No, I think it's just great that we're talking about it. That's the key. What I would say to people is, you just need to get control of your data assets. Make sure you understand where I'm in a slightly fortunate position because really all my data comes from one platform, but it doesn't matter whether it comes from one platform or many platforms. Get control of your data, and if you have a vendor that doesn't give you control of your data, have a different type of conversation with that vendor, because that's your key, right? Get control of your data assets, make sure that you start to clean that data up, and then you can really start to extract value from that data. And the opportunity space is enormous. So it doesn't matter who you work with and how you do it, it's your data, it's about your ships. So get control of that information, and then find a sort of methodology of making sure you understand that across your different systems. So get that sort of hierarchy that or ontology in place there to understand that. Do that, and then you'll really see the opportunities you can get. And there's probably not a massive cost to do that. Okay? Once you control it, you then see the opportunities. And you can also look at how you might share it externally, how you might bring in other systems into that and add value to that data. So that's sort of where I think everybody should be thinking about. If you're not thinking about that, definitely head in that direction.
That's great. Caroline?
Yeah, so for me, when I think of just in time, I would think that not only the ships has to be digitalized, the port that you go to, the port infrastructure has to be fully digitalized. And the port connectivity in terms of the network has also to be there. And then you have all the different port systems. There needs to be APIs, and there needs to be a systems interoperability. So then we will have a really effective just-in-time.
That's good. Jesse?
I don't know that I can say it much better than Stephen just did, but the industry is moving, and that's good, especially for people like us. The great news is that this is not brand new novel technology that you all in the shipping and maritime industry have to test. We're not trying to get the maritime industry into the year 2025 or the year 2030. Frankly, if we get the maritime industry to 2020, you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of where you are now. And from that perspective, a lot of this technology has already been proven out. It's very simple to deploy, and it's very cost effective. So we're not going through the trials and tribulations here and now to try and prove this out. So it's not all that hard to start collecting your data if you aren't already. And if you are, what are you doing with it? Well, contextualize it. And from there, how are you taking actions on that contextualized data? And that's where, if you don't want to build it yourself, people like we come in. So find a partner who can give you the ingredients, find a good baker, and have a party. It's pretty easy.
Well said. Ben?
Yeah, no, I think other areas of the sort of space, the data's actually there, and it's in plain sight. And so I don't think it's about choosing chunks of data. I think get the data, and then it's about the intelligent questions you ask the data,
Right.
how you pipe that around the network in a timely, consumable manner, and folks have talked about that. And then it's about the processes and the behaviors and, frankly, the incentives that you wrap around your business, which have got nothing to do with technology, as Sean was saying. It's about actually reorientating how we measure value. We talked a lot about data, and it's important. And for me, though, it's an integrated conversation that we have to be having. I don't think you can cherry pick digitalization. I do think you can have a phase-stepped, maturity-based model to how you're going to go forward, but you have to be all in. I don't think you can sort of pick a piece of digitalization most of the questions that we will be asking ourselves, whether they're about efficiency of operations, whether they're about decarbonisation, whether they're about, frankly, safety, which is kind of where my business has sort of grown up and back in the day, and it's still very important. They will really, good answers, good decision quality answers, both at the edge and at the corporate, will depend on multiple data sets, which trying to predict in advance where the real value will come from is probably a mug's game. Yeah. Get the data and crunch it and come up with decision quality choices and be all in, I think. Yeah. I don't think you can afford not to be.
That's good stuff. Mark?
Yeah, I'm coming last again. But and also realizing that lunch is fast approaching. I think, I would say so going back, the difference between those early .coms and now, and this also is the point around that ROI, is that you can do, you've got the connected infrastructure in place, you can do those proof of concepts on those one vessels to really then show the value, which previously, I very rarely heard that 20 years ago. Now, there's lots of pilots, there's lots of proof of concepts. You can work with accelerators, very closely with, and also strategic agreements. There's got strategic agreements with Inmarsat, others, other operators. We've got hundreds of partners, and it's working with those, to prove that value, come together to prove that value, and that collaboration now is key and is the difference and why shipping companies can digitally transform now.
Yep, no, that's very good. And I would just add that, this is a subject that we could literally talk about not just all day, but 4 days and not fully exhaust. The industry has reached a place where it can no longer sit and wait. As Stephen said a while ago, you may not be last, but you'll be lagging. And the cost of inaction is far more high than the cost of doing something. And any something is better than all nothing. And so I think we're a good spot to see so much conversation focused on this. Certainly challenging issues like decarbonization that can't be solved without data transparency, which can't be solved without data aggregation. We've got to move forward. And I've been in this business long enough to see owners and operators have $500 lunches to arm wrestle over a $50 invoice. And there's no ROI in that. So it's good to see us moving forward. I hope this panel has been helpful in answering some questions and demystifying as best as possible, maybe leaving some with a sense of clarity and peace and moving forward. I want to thank again our session sponsors, Wartsila and ioCurrents, and our panelists for their time in being here today. Why don't we give them a hand?